Empezamos las ponencias del día con Ivana. Es una compañera que trabajamos en uno de los proyectos europeos, de uno de los programas que vienen trabajando a nivel de la Unión Europea desde hace tiempo en materia de ordenación del territorio, del spatial planning. Ivana ha sido directora de URBANEX, ella viene de Croacia. Es una persona que viene trabajando desde hace ya bastante tiempo en todas las cuestiones relativas a la agenda territorial y urbana de la Unión Europea. Trabaja muy estrechamente en el Ministerio croata y forma parte, digamos, dentro de lo que serían las presidencias y las agendas, ¿no?, que se establecen a nivel comunitario, digamos que participa en el diseño o está también incorporada al trabajo no solo de las cuestiones metropolitanas o de agenda urbana, sino también de la definición de esta directiva de infraestructura verde. Entonces, bueno, yo quisiera agradecerle que esté hoy aquí. Ha sido, digamos, ha costado bastante poder cuadrar la agenda para que pudiera estar con nosotros. También ha tenido que superar un problema de su voz, ¿no?, porque se había quedado afónica y habían preparado incluso un vídeo, ¿no?, para poder suplir su presentación en vivo, pero fortunately you can recover your voice and you can speak and share with us your experience, your comments on this matter of green infrastructure, and probably we can cross thoughts and expertise in order to work together in the future green infrastructure directive or the road for the European Union. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. What I understood a little bit from the introduction, I think that, so you already know that basically we work a lot on the European perspective, and what is quite important, and it's not mentioned here on slide, we are following a Directorate General group on urban matters and territorial cohesion. You know, these are the highest level groups which are dealing with these two most important topics, but which are not directly under the direct provision of the European Union. So basically the production of materials within those two groups, which consists of all member states, but also of the European Commission and other interest groups and programs, basically steers around the two processes. One is urban agenda, implementation of the urban agenda, and the upcoming renewal of the Leipzig Charter. And the second one is a new territorial agenda for the EU, which is currently under, let's say, a very difficult discussion. Then another topic that we are really heavily working is the implementation of the urban agenda itself. So basically we follow the partnership on sustainable land use and nature-based solutions, which is one of the partnerships of the urban agenda, and it's a quite important one because nature-based solutions is, let's say, an umbrella term encompassing also the green infrastructure. The other topics that are quite relevant are integrated territorial investments, because they were the part of the previous financial perspective where 5% of ERDF was allocated to sustainable urban development. Now, in this financial perspective, we have 6% of the allocation, and we have European Urban Initiative, which is also going to be a quite important topic. Within ITI, we were dealing with brownfield redevelopment, which was one of the specific topics really dedicated in the national programming. And another topic which is interrelated, it's implementation of Directive of Maritime Spatial Planning, because it is also a way in which we are entering the discourse of real territorial changes. So finally, I'm going to present what we are going to speak about today. So also I would like to invite you to ask questions, to really interrupt me if I'm going too fast or if I'm moving too far away from the things that you find interesting, because it's really a huge subject, and we were drafting this presentation together in the office also thinking that I won't have the voice to present. And we were really trying to add as much as possible of the knowledge that we find really relevant at this point. But please ask more if you're interested to go in depth in one subject, or really just let's skip something if you find it unnecessary. So basically the first topic that we are going to speak about is EU legislation on green infrastructure, which I think all of you probably already know because it's very common knowledge. But what is really important is how it will connect with the Green Deal, which is totally new topic. The outlines of the Green Deal are presented on the 11th of December in front of the European Parliament for the first time. And here is the overall fund. It is 15 milliards of euros. 5 of them are going to be deducted from the cohesion fund, 5 of them from the structural reforms, and 5 of them is expected to be from the national state's budget to be part of the Just Transition Fund. It is a huge change, and we are really the witnesses of the tectonic shift of the European policies, and we should understand the link of the green infrastructure and the way in which it goes deep in all other thematic objectives to understand really how this will evolve and how strongly it will affect us. Another process that we want to present is Urban Agenda for the EU. We have really in-depth knowledge, and the partnership in which we work, sustainable land use and nature-based solutions, it's basically the partnership which deals with the overall framework of the green infrastructure. You know that the very ambitious goal of the European Union was zero net land take by 2030. The question, what is that you are deducting from the land take to make zero net land take, it's the overall question. Because the thing that you are deducting is nature-based solution, green infrastructure, so renaturification, it's a very difficult word, and this is a very good and very important question which we somehow raised in the partnership and it entered in the policy discourse. So another question is roadmap. So what are now most of the partnerships during this year are going to finish their work, and what is going to be the future of European urban agenda? How we will move on? It's a big question, and the discussion will take place also on Cities Forum in Porto. There are 2 studies which assess the current situation. One study is commissioned by European Commission. Another study is commissioned by governments of Netherlands. And they have, let's say, sometimes quite different perspective. Both of them are going to be presented in Porto, and they are going to influence heavily the process of the future urban agenda. Then this 4th point is the Green Europe point. So what are we going to do with thematic objective 2, so Greener Europe, and how it is going to link with the Green Deal? Because what we understood from the last discussion is that Green Deal will marginally be part of thematic objective 2. In fact, it will move almost entirely to thematic objective 1, which is innovation, digitalization, smarter cities, and so on. So I think it's quite important. And finally, in the point 5, we are going to show just briefly what we are doing at the national level in Croatia, because we are going to preside the European Union from the beginning of the 2021. So basically, we are drafting 2 programs, and we have 2 policy briefs. So you know that every country has to select certain topics. Now Finland is there, and they are very focused on digitalization. Our topics are green infrastructure, and another one is circular economy of space. The fact was that we wanted to make it in fact one topic, but at the end it finished in 2 policy briefs because of the structure of the ESPAN projects as well. There is a super project which we are really working with University of València, and there is a greater project. So, but they are basically interconnected subjects, and I think that the topic of circular economy of space is really growing. It will be a topic that will somehow encompass all the other green topics within it. So this is really brief. So, concerning the green infrastructure, it is defined as a strategically planned network of natural and semi-natural areas with other environmental features designed and managed to deliver a wide range of ecosystem services. It incorporates green spaces, or blue if aquatic ecosystems are concerned, and other physical features in terrestrial, including coastal and marine areas. On land, green infrastructure is present in urban and rural settings. However, the directive specifically, if we are looking at the greener Europe, is stating out the green infrastructure in urban areas as the one of the utmost importance. And the other thing that really strikes me in the policy discourse at the European level now, since the mid of this financial perspective, we are speaking about nature-based solutions. If you look at the natural capital of European Investment Bank, they're having nature-based solutions as an umbrella term encompassing also green infrastructure. And while working in the urban agenda, we were working closely with European Investment Bank, specifically department dealing with natural capital, and it was really a sort of term in which you are ending up that it was very funny because there is a German expert, Stefanie Lindberg, heading this unit. She said that it's so wide term that if someone is coming to her with the project of flowers on the balconies, it can enter in the nature-based solutions. So the question of quantification and relevance is very, very important. And this is somehow what we are missing when we are looking at the overall encompassing definitions of the European scale. So awareness of green infrastructure is continually increasing, of course, but also I think the awareness of that it is one proponent of the bigger scheme. The European Parliament is having a first debate of the European Green Deal, which focuses on the fight against climate change and other environmental objectives in areas such as transport, energy, pollution, agriculture, circular economy, and biodiversity. Parliament has already stressed out that European Union should cut emissions by 55% by 2030 to become climate neutral by 2050. And that is really a huge ambition, I think. So this is why, of course, they are asking for the budget reshuffling. And the European climate law should set in law for the first time the objective to make the EU climate neutral by 2050. This means emitting less carbon dioxide and removing from the atmosphere the carbon dioxide emitted. This requires extending the emissions trading system, which already helps the EU to reduce emissions from energy and industrial sectors to other sectors. Developing cleaner sources of energy and green technologies, which would enable us to produce, move, consume, and live in an environmentally responsible way. Also, this means developing a truly circular economy and protecting biodiversity. I don't know whether you are familiar with this or not. It's really, let's say, a totally new topic which entered at a big scale in the discourse, and I hope we will be more familiar with it by the end of this presentation. However, the outlines of this topic were already present in the urban agenda. I don't know whether I should go in detail about the origins of the urban agenda. So basically it is a Pact of Amsterdam launched in May 2016. It represents a very interesting working method because it is a multi-level working method promoting cooperation between member states, cities, European Commission and other stakeholders. And the idea was to stimulate growth, livability and innovation in the European cities. It focused on 3 pillars. The first pillar was better regulation. The second, better funding. And the third pillar is better knowledge. If you look at the assessment studies, you will see that big shortcoming of the urban agenda is better regulation. I don't know whether it was, we follow several groups in the urban agenda partnerships. So basically, the one which we are personally the most invested in is sustainable land use. But we follow one of the new partnership, it's about urban security. And I can tell you that this topic of better regulation somehow always slipped because it was considered to be too late to make interventions at the European level, and too early to really propose at the national level. So basically, all European agenda is about finding the better sources of funding, and really what it did is a better knowledge. I'm positive, and all the assessments are absolutely positive, that the partnerships designed within urban agenda were able to produce a substantial knowledge on the topics we were dealing with, and in a very good and critical way, because there was a possibility to really manage different levels of governance structures. So you had at the same table mainly cities, but national governments, very active DGs of the European Commission, such as DG Regio, and then sometimes very passive DGs, which were there just to sit around the table, and also many interest groups entering from the different point of view. And at the end, I think the action plans and their implementation really led to the production of good and coherent knowledge. And the question is, what are we going to do with it now? So what has been done so far? In 2016 and in 2018, a total of 14 thematic partnerships were launched, covering various subjects such as energy transition, urban mobility, circular economy, air quality, sustainable land use, and so on. According to the Pact of Amsterdam, the partnership had 3 years' time to develop their action plans. Except for the housing partnership, which finished during the Austrian presidency, neither one of the partnership had their final event. We are planning to have our final event, Sustainable Land Use, in Croatia during Croatian presidency this April. But somehow, except for the few partnerships, I think that most of them will finish their work and implementation of the action plans during next year. And the question is, what we are going to do after it. There are 2 assessment studies, as I already mentioned. One is done by the European Urban Knowledge Network, and it is commissioned by the governments of Netherlands, and another one by European Commissions. The assessments were presented at the DG level meeting in Helsinki, but they will also be made public at the Porto conference in January next year. So, Urban Agenda was in both assessments generally marked as a very positive process. What is really remarkable is that the reference to the European Urban Agenda is now evident in like 80% of the policy processes, at least the reference to the Urban Agenda, which is quite important for the dissemination and growing importance of the topics we were dealing with. However, there are some serious shortcomings of the process. First of all, as we are following one old partnership, this is a sustainable land use, and one new partnership, this is a security, you could see the difference in the process. In sustainable land use, we spent so much time discussing what in fact we should do, what is the scope of our activities, and the steering we had was very loose, and basically it gave some great results, because it basically gave us the possibility to really rethink certain concepts and start from the beginning, but at the same time we all feel that the process could be really smoother, and that there was really lots of energy invested in this initial phase. However, what UKN study showed, and it's really, really good, is that basically the process of drafting the European agenda motivated several member states to really start a specific urban policy at their national level. And this is something really great. Then again, concerning the shortcomings, this issue that the better regulation was not tackled sufficiently is a huge issue, and we hope somehow to overcome it while designing the roadmap. Then maybe to go more in detail, I will explain you the partnership which is really relevant for the topic of green infrastructure. It's a sustainable use of land and nature-based solutions. There we followed one of the partners. It is the city of Zagreb as one of the partners in the partnership, and the general aim of the partnership was to ensure the efficient and sustainable use of land and other natural resources to help create compact, livable and inclusive European cities for everyone. So the partnership has two interconnected aspects. One is sustainable land use and another one is deduction, nature-based solutions. One of the most important issues related to urbanization in the EU is a continuous consumption of agriculture and natural land by urban growth. Diffused, low-density, sprawled cities show much higher levels of GHG emissions and air pollution due to longer traveling distances, as well as more energy consumption and landing. So consequently, sustainable strategies often promote compact urbanization and are more characterized by provision of green areas, improved accessibility, optimized consumption of energy and resources. Basically, what we were trying to do, but I think I'm not really going into detail about this because I think that as a special planners we are all familiar with these concepts and these intentions. So basically it's the main dynamics. If you are going to make compact policies, then you should reduce the risk of heat islands, and with this you should really make very coherent strategies of naturification of the urban fabric, and this is this, let's say, twofold issue. So the partnership had two objectives: to promote the livable compactness city model. It was something that was really a tortured creation of a term. I think that Clay was one of the originators of the term. And a second one is to mainstream and promote nature-based solutions. So basically, these are, let's say, two main focuses. And maybe it is more clear how we proceeded, because every partnership of the urban agenda designed an action plan, and within this action plan we had actions, and partners included in the partnership should take lead on some actions and be co-leads on other actions. So basically, I think it was quite an interesting process, because we were lead on Action 7, better financing on nature-based solutions, and we worked together with European Investment Bank. So we are still working because it's still ongoing, the implementation of this, and it is quite an interesting, because you are able really to work on three perspectives: so European, national, and regional perspective. Also, let's say that somehow perspective of the cities is encompassing, but it's quite difficult to tackle it in very practical things such as a financing guide, because multitudes of the financing schemes is too large. However, including land take and soil properties in impact assessment procedures was one of the first actions. It was led by the city of Bologna, and they had excellent assistance of the University of Bologna. It is the research team of Simona Tondelli, working for many years on the indicators of land take. And they are quite innovative, quite good. They are heavily disputing with European Environmental Agency on basically what is a land take, and what are you deducting to calculate what is the new urbanization. So basically, if you look at the initial directive of a land take, you have a gray and green requalification, and it's quite straightforward. If you are a planner, or if you worked in the planning areas for many years, you know that there are many stages between gray and green, and the question is in fact how to measure it and how to really set common standards and indicators for the European level. And this is also evident in the Action 4, indicators of land take. And then if you see Action 9, it is something that the city of Stavanger and our Norwegian partners were trying to develop. It is like a holy grail of the whole process. So common targets and indicators for nature-based solution, urban green infrastructure, biodiversity and ecosystem services in the cities. These actions I would outline as an actions that were really trying to enter in a serious policy and scientific discourse on what in fact we are measuring, because when you move from these overall encompassing definitions, then you should really understand how different typologies of a land use are structured in the different member states and what we are thinking under which concept when we are developing national policies and programs. Another very important action is the funding and financing guide for brownfield redevelopment. It is developed by the Ministry of Spatial Planning of Luxembourg, and it is our dear colleague Frederick Richtberg and his team, and he's really trying to do very comprehensive guide on somehow looking on the European funds available and also of the processes available in the different member states concerning brownfield redevelopment. So basically, if you are saying, okay, urban containment, zero net land take, how you are going to fund very expensive requalification of the already existing and already urbanized areas, and how you're going to integrate it with nature-based solutions, green infrastructure. I will go in detail, okay, maybe a little bit more. What was the idea? So to adequately measure land take, to define a set of common indicators, to include land take in strategic environmental assessments, to explore different methods of mapping of underused land, to provide cities with up-to-date description of relevant EU-level funding and financing mechanisms, and to mainstream cooperation within functional urban areas. This is one topic which was tackled by Poland, and the idea to find a cross-European definition of functional urban areas, because basically where you are stopping the urban sprawl, not in the core city, but on the outskirts of the core city, in its functional urban areas. And so there is a whole action dedicated to the ways in which the cooperation is possible between different territorial units in different member states. It's quite interesting, and there is a strong impulse from URBANEX expert Ivan Tosic really to somehow push more in this direction of functional urban areas, but at the same time the perspective of the different member states and different urban authorities on how to manage their functional urban areas varies so much that at this point it seems quite difficult to find a common denominator for all these territories. So for the nature-based solutions, the idea was to achieve several goals. At the European, national level, actions aim to achieve further level of integration to boost the implementation of nature-based solutions across cities in Europe. This was Action 6. At city level, the partnership proposes to work on the review of existing funding mechanisms and on the development of appropriate minimum legal requirements, targets and indicators to be included within local strategies and planning instruments, Action 6 and 9. And again, at the local level, the partnership wants to raise public awareness of NBS and its potentials and to include social issues within the design of such solutions. Those goals are quite ambitious. What you have to know about the urban agenda is that there is no EU available fund really to the partners included in the process. So basically, if you want to become a partner in the European urban agenda, it is entirely your national or local budget which is going to finance the implementation of the action plans, the participation, drafting, everything. There was a fund which basically was a joint fund from the European Parliament and European Commission. I think it was some 7 million of euros, I'm not entirely sure, which was dedicated to Futurium website where you can find all the information. There's technical assistance of Ecoris, which was really technical, like organizations of the meetings, with very little expert support. So basically, the implementation of these very ambitious goals is not equally well, we don't have equal success in all of them, because basically some of the partners really lost the momentum they had at the very beginning. They understood that it requires really lots of local funds, and so they simply made very simple activities at the very end. However, some of the partners have very, very strong commitment. Like in our partnership, it's Bologna, it's Poland, it's Norway, it's Luxembourg, I think also Zagreb, and we have made some sort of a common knowledge and synergy, which is really taking a momentum. For example, at the Week of European Regions, you could see that the interest for the, also Stuttgart is, yes, they are also very, very present, that the interest is really huge for the further implementation of such topics, and also for the new partners to become part of the partnership. So I think somehow this is something that that we are going to explore further. Concerning the guide of better financing on NBS, a few problems arise because NBS is basically very loose term. As I said at the very beginning, we had very funny discussions with European investment banks on really how to make some operative definitions, because there is always this struggle between academic discourse, which wants to keep things very open, and the policy discourse, which has to measure something and to enter in some real quantification. So what we did, we analyzed previously implemented projects on NBS financing. There are many projects within Horizon 2020 dealing with NBS, and basically we were analyzing not only them but also project under LIFE program and also some national projects. We did analysis and identification of financing instruments and models. This is something that we did with really broad research on different levels of government. We are currently collecting frequently asked questions regarding financing of NBS in urban areas, because what we found really interesting is that there are many questions repeating, and then you have very different answers in different member states from the different European bodies, from the different programs, and we tried to make it somehow coherent. We have analyzed a total of 28 OPs related to RDF and Cohesion Fund, and of course NBS is almost non-existent because it's a term that emerged at the mid of the financing perspective, but the NBS way of thinking, including green infrastructure, but moving beyond, is something that is existing in many operational programs. And we are currently analyzing development strategies of cities across EU and collecting studies regarding the assessment of positive impacts of NBS in urban areas. So concerning the structure of the guide, it's going to be structured around what is NBS, purpose of the guide, what is urban agenda, NBS financing funding instruments now and in the future. It's a very difficult period for us and for the colleagues from Luxembourg, because we are at the beginning of the new financial perspective, so everything is still open. What is going to happen in the future is changing from day to day, and we are really like trying to play with many balls still in the air, and like oranges, and waiting for one to drop down, no? Because basically we don't have a multi-annual financial framework. It's still under negotiations. We think that it's going to be finished during the German presidency, on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have this big change related to the Green Deal, and there are still really heavy discussions and negotiations how it is going to influence all these aspects. And but we think, and we are really believing that the guide will help to understand why it is beneficial to implement nature-based solutions projects. And we will try to enter in the discussion how to determine real and long-term benefits of nature-based solutions. So basically, to enter in the discussion on the guidelines of the impact assessment. So this is something that, that is going to be done. Other document is related to this better regulation. So what is next? Overcoming the challenges, crucial aspects, input support, and drafting the recommendations directed toward the member states and urban authorities. It is something that we find very serious, because it will be the time of drafting operational programs, so financing instruments of many member states, and we believe that clear understanding and outline of nature-based solutions would be beneficial. So another thing is that this is one partnership, and this is one activity within one partnership. So you can understand that there is a huge process behind it. And there is the question, what is next? You know that European level, they really like charters, pacts. So now there is going to be a renewal of the Leipzig Charter. And there is an open question, why? Like, so what? There are going to be ministers, they will sign down the Leipzig Charter, and what's next? So the synergy between the Leipzig Charter process and the future of the urban agenda is going to be expressed in one document. It's called the Roadmap of the Future Urban Agenda, and there are many ideas still in the air. Something that Finland did during their presidency together with the European Commission is the idea to make thematic clusters. So, for example, from many partnerships, they understood which actions, in fact, are speaking about the same issue, and this is digitalization, and they will cluster all these actions, and they will try to operationalize them. Croatia is going to do a green cluster, so it's quite important. We will somehow, for example, there is a circular economy partnership, and they are dealing with circular economy of space. There is sustainable land use partnership, and we are dealing with brownfield redevelopment. Basically, we are speaking about the same thing, no? And we will make these cross-thematic clusters, and to build upon these synergies different partnerships are dealing with. Another thing is how we are going to deal with issues related to the cohesion policy. Since here, if I understood properly, we are all spatial planners, and there are no cohesion policy experts, or am I wrong? If there is someone who would like to speak up or say something, you are very welcome. I wanted really to explain a little bit better what is going on now, because it is very important for the topic that we are speaking about. It is basically how thematic objective 2 of a greener Europe, so which is explicitly mentioning green infrastructure in urban areas, and which will be directed in the operational program, is one body, one source of financing, and one way of reasoning. And then how you have a Green Deal, which is going, in fact, to work with thematic objective 1, which is a smarter Europe. So basically, for a green infrastructure, for a way of thinking of nature-based solutions, you will have two huge sources of funding, because I think 85% is allocated in the first two thematic goals. So basically, it's everything. And then Green Deal asks for other sources of funding. So it's member states and its structural reforms. So I think it's going to be quite important, and we should really understand that where thematic objective 2 taught about basically blueprints and how it's going to reflect and what we are going to do with the territory itself, the idea that the investments will be in thematic objective 1 is somehow leading us to the idea that we have to design the complete systems. So from the education to the nexus with SMEs, to the private sector, to links with the local innovation systems and regional innovation systems, everything should be encompassed within one definition of green infrastructure. And this is something which is really opening very big investigative lines. No, this was not really expected. It was something that new commission announced in their first speaks. Basically, like a speech of Timmermans was the first big introduction of the outlines of this huge shift, and it's up on the member states to understand soon enough how this change will take place, because although it's contested, I think Czech Republic and I can't remember which other state, but I'm sure they will reach agreements with minor changes, not major changes. And then we will have to think how really to incorporate it, because if we won't move beyond the blueprint way of thinking, we will simply lose the opportunity to use really huge resources allocated also through just transition fund, which will take place in order to make real systems, real software of the green infrastructure. And this is something that is quite important. So if you agree, I can read a few lines about European Green Deal. So it is a program outlined in the political guidelines of the incoming president of the European Commission. The idea is to make Europe the first climate-neutral continent by 2050, while boosting the competitiveness of the European industry and ensuring a just transitions for the regions and workers affected. They're taking actions to limit global warming, according to the Paris Agreement, of course, new European Climate Pact, and Sustainable Europe Investment Plan of 1 trillion of public and private investments over the decades across the EU. So a legislative proposal is a European climate law to extension of the EU emissions trading systems to the maritime sector, and the reduction of the free allowances, carbon border tax, review of the energy taxation directive, strategies and action plans, new industrial strategy, strategies for green financing and sustainable Europe investment plan, comprehensive plan to increase the EU emissions reductions targets for 2030, farm to fork strategy, cross-cutting strategy to protect citizens, biodiversity strategy, and new circular economy action plans. So financing instruments, new transition fund to support the most affected communities, industrial, coal and energy intensive regions, a mix of fresh money combined with co-financing nationally and linking to the different EU funds, agricultural, structural, help of European Investment Bank to become the first climate bank, ensure transition to the green economy. Proposal is also to turn parts of the European Investment Bank into Europe's climate bank. This is why this part with which we were working during this urban agenda is really growing in the importance. And at least 30% of the InvestEU fund will contribute to fighting climate change, non-legislative initiatives, European Climate Pact, and lead the world at 2020 conference of the parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity. So basically, I don't know whether I was too boring, probably yes, because it's really a lot of things I wanted to say, and they're not really exciting, and there are no photos, sorry. But what we find really important is to somehow understand this tectonic shift in the European policies. And is starting from this moment, and it will affect all levels of the governance, and increasingly so. So green infrastructure is, let's say, an entering key in the changes of the whole economic, educational, and innovation systems, and it will simply have a trickle in all other areas. We can't keep it separated in one little blueprint forest, but we have to integrate it with all other levels and really ensure that it will take place. So just briefly, I'm going to present as one last thing these two programs that we are doing for Croatia. One is green infrastructure in urban areas, and another one is circular management of spaces and buildings. Our idea is that although those are two separate documents, that what are they? They are programs of the national governments which are going to be adopted by the Prime Minister and all ministries, not only Minister of the Spatial Planning, but all other ministries. We have a regional development, commerce and education and so on. And we are somehow trying to make it really as a holistic programs, and they're going to enter in the European financing mechanisms at the national level, and also to the distribution of the national funds. So basically, we are working on the. Am I too long? Or?
No. Yes.
Okay. Okay. We are working at the horizontal measures, and maybe it will be clear how we are going to move. If you look at the scales that we will introduce at the circular management of spaces and buildings, we are thinking to work with XL scale. It is renewal of the entire parts of the cities. So to introduce the concept, of course, of urban containment means that you should intensify the uses of the already existing urban fabrics, but not in the way that you are making a soil sealing, but in the way that you are introducing green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. Then L scale is urban renewal of a certain zone, which has at this point a monofunctional use. It is a brownfield in the narrow sense, like a former industrial zone, former military zone. Then we have M scale. It is the scale of abandoned buildings in the urban fabrics. S scale, individual abandoned spaces within buildings which are in different use. And we even introduced XS scale. It is intensifying the uses of spaces which are already in use. For example, if you have a building in which there is a school for 8 or 10 hours, then how to intensify the use of this public building in the rest of the day. And we are thinking to design financial schemes, whether they are grants or financial instruments for each of these scales. So then this is aspects related to the circular economy. And then we are going to integrate it with the program on green infrastructure, in which we are going to design a range of criteria to enter in the relation with each scale of this program. So basically, this is something which I wanted to present as a very practical thing, because policy processes at the European level, which are basically most of the things that we are doing, sometimes can sound very abstract. They seem maybe disconnected and very far away, but they are affecting us very, very much. And they are the ones really directing the ways in which we allocate our time, resources, and activities. And so we strongly believe that it's a two-way process. There is always a need to look very close at the territory, at the territorial level, because sometimes you can be totally lost in your own semi-bureaucratic discourse, and but then also to zoom out, by learning from the really local experiences, influence somehow the policy process is taken at the highest level. So thank you. I think this is all, and I hope that you will have some questions and that I can maybe help clarify some issues.
is very important from a, I think, political point of view, the possibility to take into account all these kind of movements, because we need to make a profit, to make some movement in that direction in order to prepare much better this kind of, it is an opportunity also for the regional and the ministry, I think, authorities in order to put in the agenda related with funds, with program, with better regulation, with securities, legal, but also with assessment indicators and so on. I think it was really exciting, at least for me. I hope also for you. Se abre el turno de palabras para si alguno de ustedes, de vosotros, queréis hacerle alguna pregunta. En principio tendríamos después, vamos con un poco de retraso como ya habéis podido comprobar, pero en principio creo que valdría la pena abrir el turno de palabra porque ahora que estamos en caliente tal vez hayan surgido algunas dudas o algunas cuestiones que valga la pena preguntarle a Ivana, ¿no? Es una suerte que haya podido recuperar su voz, ¿no? Cosa que no teníamos claro que pudiera hacer, pero ya habéis visto que su estructura, ¿no?, discursiva y mental, de cómo tiene todo controlado, ¿no?, el hecho de trabajar, digamos, con tomadores de decisiones, aunque ella está muy preocupada por esto de la abstracción, pero creo que ha hecho una presentación, yo creo que muy ilustrativa sobre las oportunidades que esto nos abre, ¿no? Y a mí me parece que es importante, como siempre habrán velocidades en Europa, ¿no? Digamos, los germánicos irán por una vía muy rápida y lo tienen clarísimo, ¿no? Es decir, nosotros vamos a ver si somos capaces de poder seguir al rebufo o colocarnos, ¿no?, en la salida en este tema de la Green Infraestructure y todo el cambio climático en relación con esto de las agendas urbanas, la revisión de planes generales de ordenación urbana y también el aprovechamiento, ¿no?, de los PADs, ¿no? Yo creo que esto nos abre una oportunidad en conjunción. Quisiera plantearles a los responsables, aunque no hay aquí gente del Ministerio, perdón, de lo que sería la Consejería de Hacienda, ¿no?, el hecho de empezar a preparar una visión un poco más coordinada, como ella acaba de decir. Es integral, ¿no? Es decir, aquí no es una cuestión departamental, es una cuestión de que la gente se cree que aquí puede haber mucho dinero detrás por la financiación, pero claro, tú tienes que hacer un buen programa y tienes que tener buenos elementos de seguimiento y tiene que estar bien coordinado. Es algo que venimos pidiendo algunos desde hace como bastante tiempo, ¿no? Pero ya veis que hay gente que no pierde el tiempo y va en primera dirección o en primera velocidad. Por otra parte, también aprovecharía para invitar, ¿no?, a los presentes, ¿no?, la posibilidad de unir, ¿no?, desde el punto de vista de la colaboración institucional con el partner croata para ir en una de las líneas, ¿no?, de esta agenda urbana que estaremos preparando. O sea que yo creo que ha sido una aportación really important for us, Ivana. I think it was a pleasure, and I think we can elaborate much better in the future. Se abre la palabra para quien quiera preguntar alguna cosa.
Usually, when we implement some NBS project, requires a lot of land to be purchased, to be usually by via compulsory purchase, or another systems to buy the land for, especially private land, for allocating this kind of project. So far, European Union funds has been very reluctant to give money, to allocate money for purchasing land. So, taking into account this new scheme, can we expect a change of mind of European Commission or European funds, in fact, to direct some of these funds to usually acquire, to purchase this kind of land? Because if not, it's very difficult, very hard to implement this kind of solutions based in nature, especially 2 days ago we were in the La Vega Baja, especially after the devastating floods, and we proposed a kind of nature-based solution of the river, for channelizing the river, in terms of using the green infrastructure to get a sound solution. So most of the people were questioning about and how are we going to fund this project, because it's a massive, it requires a massive quantity of money. So my question, my specific question is if we can expect this change of mind, this change of position of the European Union allocating funds for purchasing private land, because usually in Mediterranean areas or in European areas, most part of the land is private, it's not public land, and it's difficult to act or to implement a project without we not obtain this kind of private land.
Thank you for the question. It's a really good one, because what we noticed in many member states, it is the main obstacle to the implementation, basically the ownership over land, and also the mechanisms of expropriation of the land, because in some countries it's very lengthy process. And especially concerning floods, for example, now we are going to lose a huge amounts of funds because we were not able to resolve the property issues in one of the projects related to the floods protection. Currently, it is 10% of the overall amount of the project value if it is a grant, could be allocated to the purchase of the land. This is the current state. Concerning the new financial perspective, we are still at the level of deciding the contours. So now they are fighting in the terms of trillions. What is going to go there? They're fighting the big budget lines right now. And this is the topic. And the implementation lines, what you are speaking right now, because for this financial perspective was 10% of the project you can dedicate for purchasing of the land. And it was the common denominator of ERDF and CF funds for the member states. Whether this is going to change or no, it's still, let's say, 2 steps in front of us. And but I completely agree that this is going to be one important topic. And but I think that they're going to, what I know so far, they're going to change perspective in the way that they will ask for more of the national co-financing for every member state, and that the rules to spend the national co-financing will be different. And this is thus allowing the bigger flexibility. And what is going also to take place is this financial mix. They want to transfer a lot of things to the models of financial instruments. And this is something which is really already taking place. This natural capital of European Investment Bank was important pilot in this financial perspective, and I believe that this department, it's called, I think, Urban Unit, Jerry Muscovedo, I think he's heading it. They're going to grow, and there will be a combination of grants, like, the different, and financial instruments to make the funding mix for the complex projects. And this is something that for sure we will. So to make it clear, they will probably leave this 10% or increasing, but only in the national co-financing part. And for the rest, you will have the financial instruments that can follow you to close the financial construction of the project.
Bueno, pues entonces, Ivana, many thanks for your effort to